You got to have your boots strapped on and ready to go in the morning and in the evening, 24 hours a day. It's probably one of the most dangerous places in this country. I went to Victorville. I went to the medium, Victorville. They got two penitentiaries there. I believe they got one penitentiary and they got two mediums there. And I believe I was at the number 1, FCI, Victorville 1. Unfortunately, that's complete territory of Mexicans, and a lot of them are getting shipped back to their country. That's a place that they hold for deportation also, a combination. When I got there, I realized that I was the only Puerto Rican in the yard. Unfortunately, they sent me there for a reason. Hopefully that I get involved in something or some other group will come and smash me and hurt me and injure me. But apparently that didn't work out because I got there. It was different. I think it's one of the hottest yards I've ever been to. California, Texas, and Arizona are the three probably toughest yards because they roll different. West Coast roll different from East Coast. Victorville, the minute you walk in there, the first thing you need to do is go get yourself a shank. It's a knife. That's what we call it, shank. You definitely need one there. It's extremely dangerous. It's very hostile. A lot of tension, but the tension, like I said, is between the brothers and the Mexicans there. There's a lot of tension there. You always walking, watching your back. You got to sleep, and the only time, of course, you sleep is when the door is locked. You got to have your boots strapped on and ready to go in the morning and in the evening, 24 hours a day. It's a very dangerous place. I think it's probably one of the most dangerous places in this country. West Coast, any type of, even state joints is dangerous. Anything out in California, Texas, and Arizona is completely like top notch. Yeah. They have two mediums, and then they have a U.S. penitentiary. That's the highest in California. They all call Victorville. Victorville Penitentiary. They got Victorville Medium 1 and Victorville Medium 2. And they have a girls' low custody, only for females. You see more, it was more, honestly, more Mexican because it's closer to the border and they use that for a deportation center. And a lot of them from Cali anyways. You got of course, you got Sureños. And there's probably about 128 gang members of Sureño. And I'm not talking about people, I'm talking about different chapters. And that's probably one of the largest in the world. It's out of California. They rule that yard, pretty much they rule that yard. Then you got the Paisas, which are regular Mexicans. They use that as a word for farmers, like hillbillies. They all get together for protection. But they really, pretty much, they run like a gang out there. And there's a lot of them. Actually, the majority was them. You know, you have the Border Brothers. They're supposed to protect the Paisas, but they don't. And then they had the Arizona chapter there from Arizona called the AZ Boys, which I got along with them. I think they're good people. And of course, you got the Bloods and the Crips. You got Neutrals. You got the Neutral Blacks. You got the Neutral Whites. You got the ABs, Aryan Brotherhoods there from California chapter. They won't allow no Texas people in there. If you're from Texas, you can't walk that yard. They also had Midwest. They had Midwest, I think Crips there, or GDs. And what happened, something jumped off. Yeah, it was the GDs there, and something jumped off with the Crips. So they took the whole car, and when I mean the whole car, they took the whole group off the yard. And that happened right on the yard too. In fact, there was two of them. That was a riot. I forgot about that one. That one happened before the big one. Yeah. Well, I ended up in Victorville due to a situation between me and an officer here in FCI Petersburg. What happened was the dude came out with a racial comment. I responded back negative. It became an altercation. I got locked up. They jacked my custody up high, and they said, well, you know, we're going to punish him. So they gave me the diesel therapy, and they hoped they placed me in the yard that somebody would kill me in retaliation for that situation with that officer. That's how I ended up to Victorville out there. I did 2 years out there. Extortion, that it was an everyday thing at Victorville. If you was weak, you got extorted. Even if you was tough, you got extorted. The problem is this: if you have backup, the magic of this whole situation is if you got backup, you got pull, then you'll have a chance of not getting extorted. There was very few that can walk that yard that didn't, that were alone. I've never had that problem at Victorville. I got tested at first. When I first walked in there, I got tested. I walked into a cell that's supposed to be Mexican. And the guy walked into my cell without knocking. And that's what set up the situation. I ended up clocking him in his face. And I got my respect that way and told him to get the hell out. It's not a Mexican cell, it's a Puerto Rican cell. So that's how that started. But for some reason, somebody knew me from Walpole back in the days of Massachusetts. And he was doing time there. And he was running Sureño. Actually, he's Puerto Rican. Let me rephrase that. It was two of us. But I didn't remember him. And when he came to my cell, he came with about 4 or 5 of his boys. He heard I was there. And somehow he recognized my name. And so he came to me. And he said, "You don't remember me?" And I won't mention his name. And he told me his name. And I said, "No." He says, "You remember the prison riot in Massachusetts? You saved my life. I'm Boricua." I said, "Oh man, you look Mexican with all them tattoos in your head, right?" And actually, I gave him a hug and everything. But he also helped me pave my way at Victorville. You know, because he looked over at the Mexican dude that was running that unit, and he says, "You got an issue with him?" He said, "No, no, no, no." He was holding his jaw. And I was going to go one-on-one with a knife in the cell with him. But it didn't go like that because, of course, my man there really kind of paved the way. So he brought me like about 4 or 5 laundry bags of clothes, food. You know, he hooked me up cigarettes and stuff like that. He did help me out. You know, I got a table for me. Oh, they call it the Caribbean table. Anybody that's Puerto Rican or Colombian or Dominican, anybody outside of being Mexican was able to sit there with me. He got me a TV, which I have my own TV where I can program. I didn't have to sit with any other group. That guy helped me out. I really appreciate it. But that's how that went down, my first day there. That was my first day walking in there. And of course, I got my knife. I was issued my knife. One day, like I said, I was heading to the yard, and I caught the movement in the yard, and really pretty much the brothers was posting up. And when I mean posting up, they were ready to strike. To who, I didn't know. To what, I didn't understand. But I heard one of them say something about Mexicans. And I walked by. I had a good relationship with the Crips and Bloods there and the Neutrals, brothers there. And I can't say I was liked very much by the Mexicans. I don't think I was, but they respected me because I didn't like them and they didn't like me. But even some of the Sureños, they were cool, but I don't think every one of them liked me. A lot of the Mexicans do not like Puerto Ricans. We don't get along really technically inside the joint. But I was going to the library and I got caught right between the metal detector. Because the minute that jumped off, all you heard was the alarm in the whole yard. And I mean, it jumped off from the kitchen. It jumped off in the library. It jumped off in school. It jumped off in every unit. And I think there was like 12 units there. And each unit hold like 200 and something inmates. So, I mean, the whole yard. And then they have 2 different yards broken up sections. That jumped off. The whole yard is like it was planned ahead of time. The situation, what really jumped that off was over the microwave. I guess one of the Mexicans was using the microwave. One of the brothers came over, took his food out the microwave, threw it on the floor. However, the leader that was running the yard of the Mexican at that time had an issue with that same guy in another joint. So he went over to his shot caller and told him, "Listen, you got to get the guy off the yard." This is what he did. The brother said, "No, we're going to take care of it and we're going to punish him our way, but we're not taking him off this yard." So, of course, because it was personal with the Mexican and this dude, he turned around. He said, "Well, listen, I tell you what, you don't get him off the yard by bop, bop, bop at a certain time, then it's on. Apparently, the leader, the shot caller of the Mexican. Now, I'm not talking about the Sureños or the Mexican Mafia. I'm just talking about the Paisas, because this really started with the Paisas. It had nothing to do with the Sureños. They're their own. They're their own thing. They're their own boss. They're pretty much, actually, because they did that, the Sureños got mad at them because they didn't let the Sureños know what was going down. So they kind of like got surprised when the brothers attacked. You know what's crazy? That the situation originally started in microwave. It was brewing for like 2 weeks. And I'm surprised it even went that long. Normally, something like that jumps off the bat right there. And it took about 2 weeks. And that's why a lot of people got mad at the Paisas, at the Mexican Paisas, because they didn't tell nobody what was going on. And really, it started in one unit. And they kept it confined there, but it was brewing, it was brewing, it was brewing. It's like when you're cooking something and you keep it on high, what happens? It keeps overflowing, overflowing, overflowing until you stop it. But this situation kept overflowing, and even staff knew. I mean, staff knew, they didn't care, because they love locking down the joint. They don't got a problem locking down the joint. They love it. The first thing that I remembered when the riot took place was I was walking across the yard and I seen two individuals, two brothers that were packing, and I seen them reach for their piece on the side. And the conversation that took place already alerted me that something was going on with the Spanish dudes, and when I mean Spanish, it's Mexicans. And so that alerted me right there. And plus the alarm went right off. Not seconds after that I picked on what was going on, I went through the metal detector, because you got to, anytime you go in and out of the unit, you got to go through a metal detector. There's officers there. In fact, the officers locked me out. The minute they did, they lock every section to control the amount of people. And so it was crazy, because when I looked up, officers were getting thrown down the stairs. They were trying to lock the units, and the Mexicans just kicked the door and just went. I mean, they had to get out because the riot was really outside. So, I mean, you got 12 units there, and you got hundreds of dudes running down the stairs. They just stomping on the officer. They didn't care. They just wanted to get out there and be a part of that. You know, they wanted to be a part of that. And you have to. You got no choice, because if they find out you don't get involved and you run with that crew, then you hit. You ain't going nowhere. They're going to take you out in the stretcher whenever they get a chance to get you. The craziest thing that happened during that riot that I seen visually, it really freaked me out, because I've never seen something like this. I remember that I was running towards an area where they had all the brothers kind of like surrounded. And they were trying to lock that gate, but when they locked that gate, there was probably maybe 20 Mexicans in there. If they would have locked that gate, the situation, what happened is that those 100 or 150 brothers would have smashed them 20s and stabbed them to death. So the object is to stop the officer from blocking that gate. So I remember that they came in there. I'm running towards there because I have to keep moving around. I can't stay in one spot in that riot. You can't stay in one spot. You got to move. And I was able to dodge a lot, but I was also happened to confront issues where I had to take care of myself. Now, I didn't have an issue with the brothers, but when you look at me tatted up, they think I'm Mexicans. A lot of them knew of me and seen me once or twice, but they didn't recognize me. So, you know, I have weapons pulled out on me, which I had to get busy myself. But I'm running towards there, and as I'm running towards there, I'm watching the Mexicans jumping on the officers, trying to stop them from that. And they stopped beefing in that corner. Here comes a group of officers, and they took the concussion bombs, and he threw it, and it hit the dude right here. In fact, it was a border brother. It's a Mexican gang. It hit the dude right here, and I heard it bounce off his head. But when it got probably, I would say maybe about 5 inches away from his head, it blew up, and his brains was just leaking out of his head. And the dude fell right on me, and his blood splattered on me, and I laid him down. So a couple of the Mexicans came and brought him and took him out of there. I don't know where they brought him to. The other one is they took a fire hydrant, or what do you call a fire extinguisher, And when they hit the dude, man, they peel his cap back. I mean, you can see his forehead, his bone, and everything. His whole head, like he got scalped by an Indian. I mean, it was some vicious stuff. I seen dudes getting hung up in the barbed wire fences and their arm ripped off because they, they were scared and wanted to jump over the fence. The officers on the other side were shooting them because they're in the dead man's zone. Dead man, you can't walk on the dead man's zone. And if you're running, they're going to shoot you because there's towers. I was actually watching some really live stuff going down. Pretty much, it was a lot of blood everywhere. I was involved. I had no choice. I had to fight for my life. You know, like I said, I got along. I didn't have an enemy there, but I was in the middle of the riot. And because I'm Hispanic looking with tattoos, I was probably misplaced as a Sureño. And so I had brothers coming at me, even though I got along. In fact, I spent more time with the brothers than I did with I don't even really deal with the Mexican much. I spent a lot of times with the brothers there, kicking it with them. Or if not doing legal work, I was in the library, yeah. It was a 12, I would say almost 12 hour, maybe anywhere from 10 to 12 hours, maybe a little bit longer. It was a very long night. It was a long night of beefing. It was a long night of fighting. I was exhausted. The result of that was when they finally came down and clamped down on the yard and got controlled. We stayed up all night. They put us in segregation. They got big cages down there that will hold probably about 100 person at a time. Dudes was bleeding, stab wounds. They didn't care if you was injured. You waited there until they interviewed you and found out who you were. They had special gang units there to identify people, what type of gangs, who do you belong, who you run with, why are you doing here, asking questions, investigation. And they were really pretty much separating people in segregation. And that's what they were doing. They were getting ready for a big ship out. In the beginning, they ran. They didn't know what, they panicked, they ran. But when the backup came, they came in with weapons in the yard. They had weapons. The second load had serious weapons. The first load had like these BB things. I mean, they hit you, they hurt. They had the bing bags with the shotgun. They had batons. They had concussion bombs. But they had the stuff that's necessary, cuffs and stuff like that. But the second crew that came in with M16 rifles. They weren't playing, yeah. They were shooting. They had these rubber bullets too. They got the rubber bullets too that put you down. There was too many. They were outnumbered. I mean, the yard the yard alone where I was at, you can count like probably 800 people in that yard when it jumped off. And that's not even talking about everywhere else because it jumped off everywhere. You might have in the kitchen at the time 70 people fighting. In a library, you probably had 40. In the other yard, you probably had about 300 or 400 more people. Plus the units. They were throwing people off the tiers and everything. They were just throwing guys off the tier. Second floor, third floor tiers, yeah. To stop the riot, really, the only one that stopped it was the authorities. And they stopped it. I mean, but it went for a long period of time. By the time they got back up and enough people to come in there to solve it, it was almost like 12 hours. It was a long beef. They kept coming in and out of the yard. Every time they came in, they got chased out. They got beat down. I mean, they actually got physically hurt. I am not aware of any officers that got stabbed and they made off. I really wasn't paying attention to that. I know that there was officers that they got hurt. I personally was able to knock out my case manager. I couldn't stand him. I took the opportunity while he was out in the yard. I hit him in the jaw. Yeah. I couldn't stand him, yeah. Didn't get hurt, I was lucky. Like I said, I was fighting for survival. There were certain times people came at me. I eliminated that problem. And then everybody would run, get up and run somewhere else and fight somewhere else. It was kind of like comedy in a sense. Even though it was real and it was dangerous, it was comedy. It was like I don't know if you remember the old, there was like 12 officers, police officers, the Keystone Cops or something like that. It was a comedy with Jackie Chan, the one that walks around with the cane, the funny type of stuff like that, hilarious. It was really funny because they would jump here, fight over here. Then the group, they would break up and then they'll go over here and fight another group, and you know what I mean? And then it was just bouncing around. Everybody was fighting with everybody. It was just crazy. It was really chaotic. It's kind of funny in a sense, but it was serious. It reminded me of the cartoons, you know what I mean? The fight was not focused on just one person. It was focused on anything they seen, and whatever they did is just crazy. A couple of guys would get beat up and then end up going fight another group that think they were weaker. So it was like that. It was funny, but it was serious. I would say probably took about another 2 months in the shoe. About 2.5 months before I got shipped out. I was in the shoe. After that Riot jumped off, we all went to the shoe. I never got back out in population. I stayed in the shoe, and then they sent me from that shoe next door to the USP holdover. That's where the transfer happens. So anybody that's getting transferred, they leave from that institution. It's not really far. It's just a 5-minute ride. And they take you to the Supermax, which it is a Supermax, and they put you in a holdover. It's like a segregation, but it's a holdover. They hold you there. And then you wait for your transfer there, because normally when you go there, you're leaving within 4 or 5 days, about a week. Oh, I was delighted to leave. You know, a couple of reasons why. It's because I'm not Mexican. I'm not from California. That yard is like walking on ice, thin ice. And everything is just jumped. Something is going on every day in that yard. It's an extreme violent yard. You have to be on point when you go in that yard. I don't like West Coast. I never dream of. I'm hoping never to go back, but I don't. That's one last place I want to be, is in the West Coast, Texas, or even Arizona. That's all on the West Side, anyways. But yeah, I don't. I wasn't happy when I got there, but I was happy when I left 2 years later.